Mindy's eyelids were heavy. Her head bobbed up and down as she faded in and out of sleep. She pinched herself to try to stay awake, but the house was so quiet and calm. Even the tree frogs, crickets, and the other creatures of the night had stopped chirping and croaking. It seemed all of Maryland was asleep at this late hour, except young Mindy. What is the setting for this story? At age 6, Mindy should have been asleep too. Her body and mind cried out for sleep, yet she dared not doze off for fear she would not hear the baby crying. This baby was Mindy's responsibility. She watched over the baby day and night, rocking him to sleep, kept him warm in his blanket, and sang songs to keep him happy. Mindy would do almost anything in her power to keep him happy, for she knew that if he cried, she would be punished. And so, each time the baby stirred in his crib, each time he whimpered or moaned, Mindy's heart raced. As soon as the baby cried out, even if he only cried for a moment, the baby's mother would get very angry with Mindy. Do you think that it was fair for the baby's mother to get angry with Mindy when her baby cried? This was awful, painful reality in which Minty lived, because Minty was an enslaved African person. Even at the tender age of 6 years old, she was forced to work for no pay all day, every day, and Mindy thought she would be enslaved for her entire life until she died. This was the terrible truth of slavery. Mindy and the other enslaved Africans, like her, had no rights or freedom. Minty would be forced to do the hard work given for her from sunup to sundown, providing great value to the plantation owner almost every day of her entire life. Very, very little of Mindy's time would ever be her own to do with as she wished. This is what life was like for millions of people in the United States of America when Mindy was 6. In fact, this is what life had been like for many people for a long time, long before Mindy or her parents and grandparents were born. One night, Mindy asked her mother how and why she and her family had been enslaved. Well, your grandfather, her mother would tell her. She came over the ocean on a great big ship. She came from a place called Africa. Many Africans are here now, enslaved in this land they called the United States. Why did grandmother and other Africans come here? Mindy asked. It was not their choice to come here from Africa, her mother explained. Africans were captured by men with guns and other weapons who wanted to bring them to America to work in slavery. They were put on these ships against their will, and when they were brought to this country and sent to places like plantations, farms, businesses, or households to work. That's why our life is the way it is. We do as we are told. We do our best to survive. By this, Minty's mother meant they were working hard to keep their families as safe and healthy as possible. Minty's father and mother had 9 children, including Minty. But, like most enslaved Africans, the family did not like or work together all in one home. Minty's mother worked for a man named Edward Broadus. Minty's father worked for a man named Edward Thompson, whose plantation was down the road from the Broadus home. 3 of Minty's sisters were sent away to work for plantation owners in Georgia. Minty never saw any of them again. As her mother said, enslaved people did not have a choice to say in the matter. The plantation owners did whatever they had to do to make as much money as possible from their plantations and slave labor. Because families of enslaved Africans often could not live together or were separated, they depended on the community of the enslaved Africans on the plantation. Mothers and fathers would take care of their children who were not their own. Enslaved Africans helped and supported each other as communities by looking out for each other and working together. In this way, they could be stronger together despite the fact that they were enslaved. Although life was hard for the enslaved people, this working together and helping each other contributed to their survival and made it easier. Where Minty lived, the enslaved Africans worked hard to perform many jobs that added value to the plantation. They took care of horses and tended crops of tobacco, corn, and hay, plowing, planting, and harvesting. In the winter, they chopped wood, mending fences, and helped clear more land for farming. Many enslaved people were skilled at a trade. Some tended to the farm animals and preserved the meat. Weavers, spinners, and seamstresses were involved in the process of making clothes. Their skills were valued. Skilled carpenters constructed and repaired buildings and made furniture, and blacksmiths used iron to make and mend important tools for the life and work of the plantation. Many lived in shacks with dirt floors and had one set of tattered clothes and no shoes, and didn't have enough to eat. Most enslaved Africans worked out in the fields, performing the many difficult tasks involved in growing and harvesting the crops. They were known as field slaves, and they lived the hardest lives of all. They worked from early morning until late at night, often with no relief from the heat or rest from their hard labor. They always worked under the watchful eye of the overseers, people who kept watch over and directed the enslaved people. The enslaved people always worked under the threat of punishment. Other enslaved Africans worked in what was known as the big house, the beautiful mansion belonging to the plantation owners. They did not have to work in the hot sun. They wore nicer clothes than the field slaves, and they sometimes had access to more food than the field slaves. In addition to daily cooking and cleaning, house slaves helped make butter, wash the household laundry, and take care for the plantation's owners' young children. That was Mindy's job, which was why she was watching the baby at night. Just like those who worked in the fields, enslaved Africans who worked in the house worked hard. But also, like the people who worked in the fields, they helped each other a lot, and this made it less hard and less sad. Plantations, like the one where Mindy and other enslaved Africans lived and worked, were common throughout Maryland and all of the states in the southern United States, or the South. The South had rich soil and endless farmland. Those who owned the land could get rich by growing and selling tobacco, cotton, and other crops. Running a large plantation required many workers. There were no tractors or other machines to help in those days. The enslaved Africans worked on plantation contributed valuable skills and labor to their success of the plantation. Without the enslaved Africans, the plantation could not run. They did many important jobs of all kinds. Even so, rather than hiring workers and paying them, plantation owners who were white forced people who were black to work for free in the life of slavery. The plantation owners thought they could treat these African people in this way because they looked different. Because of the difference in the way they looked, the plantation owners thought they were better than the people they enslaved. As enslaved people, they were not given any wages for work. They did on the plantation. Wages means the money earned for doing work. Were enslaved Africans given wages? Millions of Africans were taken from their homes and shipped across the Atlantic Ocean to live in the life of slavery. And the children of the enslaved Africans, children like Mindy and her sisters and brothers, automatically became enslaved the very moment they were born. They would likely remain enslaved until they died. As Mindy's mother explained, enslaved people did not have the choice to be free people, or did they? Earlier on, Mindy began to wonder whether it was possible to resist or fight back as the enslaved person. She wondered this because she had, in fact, seen her own mother resist the plantation owner's wishes. When Mindy was young, Mr. Broadus arranged to send her brother Moses to a plantation belonging to another owner. Mindy's mother had already seen 3 of her daughters sent far away to another plantation down south, and she was determined not to lose any more of her children. When Mr. Broadus came to fetch Moses to send him away with the other plantation owner, Mindy's mother stood at the doorway and promised, "I will not allow any more of my children to be taken away." Something in her eyes must have scared Mr. Broadus that way, because he turned around and he never tried to send Moses or anyone else in Mindy's family away again. This even gave Mindy a shred of hope that one day she may be able to fight back and possibly win her freedom. Do you think Mindy will eventually fight back and win her freedom?